Hey, I'm Cortina from Finn.
And I'm Sam.
So we wanted to just check in today and talk about something that Sam just wrote about on our blog, which is robotic process automation, and some thoughts he had on how to get started with that if you haven't really dove into it yet.
Yeah, so RPA is this kind of trend, it's like the buzzword now, right, for big enterprises or companies effectively taking a human-computer hybrid approach to work, right, where they're saying rather than going whole hog on I'm going to automate everything, which was a nice story but isn't very real, like the real thing, which is having huge impact for people, is saying I have, from a big company, thousands, tens of thousands, 100,000 people doing all sorts of knowledge work, and I can take pieces of what they do, the really repetitive stuff, the robotically possible automatable stuff, right? And just script it, right? And so, the old way you talk about this is macros, right? The new way is kind of introducing bots that, basically take pieces, whether it's moving files around or filling out forms or pulling together data. The reality is you can focus your teams on the most human work and get a lot of leverage out of that, right? And basically let this robotic stuff happen pretty automatically. It's going really well. I mean, there are companies are getting a ton of leverage out of this. But one big thing that keeps coming up with it, and I've heard a lot of people talk about this, and it's been an interesting thing for us because we did so much of this on our own, right, in our own systems with the Fin Assistant, is how do you know what to automate? How do you know how to do it? And then how do you know what the returns are from it? And everyone has different problems here, right? So the first is like, what should you even automate? Where should you make this investment first, right? And I think people go through their own processes of how they make the decisions with it. It usually involves consultants and time studies, right? People looking over their shoulders with stopwatches and figuring out where the effort is going. But it's like a super unclear thing about what to do if you have a big team. Like understanding where time is going, where effort's going, where mistakes are being made that potentially a bot would not make in like a very repeatable task. There's obviously other ways to do it. We have strong opinions about that. The second area that there's a big challenge around is actually implementing it, right? So, let's say you want to implement an RPA process around, X, Y, or Z. The reality is like you need enough samples of people doing it to understand how to do it, right? The first blush example or how one employee might do a process might not actually be what you want to implement broadly. It's going to have holes in it, right? You need to actually have enough data and sample to be able to like do the implementation properly. And the third one's super interesting, which is actually knowing the ROI of all this, right? Which is, yes, it's nice in theory, right? And it should be faster and it should create leverage, but how much? Like, did it just cause other problems or other changes in workflow downstream, which were more expensive in some other way? And so basically the whole problem is knowing what of all the things you could implement RPA around to start with, or what order to do things in, how to do it, and then what the ROI is. And what's cool is we internally did a bunch of this at Fin, and our answer was what we now have as Fin Analytics, right? Where you start with analytics, you start by thinking about all these questions about like just instrument our teams. Let's understand where work is going. Let's understand how it's being done, and then kind of that gives you the basis to do RPA well.
Yep. Yeah, one of the things that sort of comes to mind when I think about RPA, and particularly from the ROI perspective, is it can be very expensive to 100% automate a process and pull a human out of the loop. So one of the things that we did at Fin with the assistant product was we built a lot of tools to make our people much faster. And a lot of times it's 10 times less engineering effort to build something that makes a human 80% faster than it is to fully automate the process. And if you can get with these like little investments all your people 80% faster, you're talking about huge savings. So I think it's intimidating if you think about robotic process automation as like, oh, I have to like do something so sophisticated that pulls somebody out of the loop completely. I think the better approach is to sort of just think about how do we just make the people we have much more effective. And the video really lends itself to that because if you're thinking about, if you were just looking at a menu of like all the different tasks that people on your team are doing, you're probably thinking about those tasks as a whole. What's cool about the video is you can watch videos of a particular task and see, okay, within somebody doing work on this task, maybe there's like a 5-minute chunk of a 30-minute task that you can just make totally go away. And it wouldn't really leap to mind if you're looking at just like sort of like raw numbers on like this type of task takes this amount of time.
Yeah, I think the introspection's key because there are also other places where like actually the same thing might be a small fraction of all of the tasks, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
With the data and then with understanding, being able to like introspect with the video, et cetera, you can kind of see that and then know where to build. I think that's like one of the major values is like the way that you would break down a set of tasks and decide what human process to automate is quite different than understanding which slices to start automating or where the commonalities are when you're introducing machines into the loop to work with people. But yeah, again, I mean, this isn't rocket science. The reality is that we all know you can't optimize what you don't measure, right? And we all know that knowledge work is generally not measured in today's environment, or if it is, it's only the outcomes. It's not the process of how. And it is cool to watch RPA taking off because I think it really speaks to this whole pragmatic uses of ML and AI, right? And it also speaks to like the pragmatic pieces of like how do we make people more leveraged in human knowledge work by
and
like
happier
allowing
at work.
and
Because
happier.
nobody wants to do all this robotic bullshit work, basically, to be totally frank about it. And if you can make the robotic stuff go away, your entire team will be happier. You'll retain them longer. Everybody's gonna win.
You got to start with measurement.
Yep.
Anyway.
Cool.
Cool.
Till next time.